We are going to now move over to local media and how to amplify your voice using your local media. Media is such an important part of using your voice and getting the word out and influencing your legislators. So Britta is going to walk us through how we can do that for the rare disease community. She is a rare disease patient living with primary lymphedema for over 3 decades. As Senior Director of Communications and Marketing for the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases, Britta initiates strategies that inspire patients and caregivers to engage in advocacy and make their voices heard. Thank you for being here today, Britta.
Thank you so much for having me. It really is. I'm super psyched to be working with the inaugural class of Rare Advocacy Learning. This is a really special group, and I really am very honored to be here. And from what Shannon just said, what I'd love you to understand about where I'm coming from is that I spent years and years working for elected officials, many on the state level, for the governor, state legislator, and the local level, county executive, and whatnot. And so I see that side of it. So it's interesting watching the presentation like we just listened to. But at a certain point a few years back, I realized, you know what, I've been pushing hard to advance these elected officials' agendas, and maybe you've experienced this. I'm at the point where I want to advance my agenda, and that top agenda was people with primary lymphedema or other rare diseases. So that's why I'm here, and my sister has a rare disease as well. So my specialty is communications and marketing. I can't get enough of it. I really love it. So that's what I'm hoping to bring here to the table for you to learn. We just talked about how to amplify your voice to state and local officials. Well, a big way to do that, to amplify your voice, is through the megaphone of media. So I'm hoping by the end of our little time here today that you'll have some real ideas brewing that maybe you could even apply to your capstone presentations. We'll see. So today, as you can see by my goofy slides, I love goofy clip art, it can be kind of fun. So you don't have to be a celebrity to make the news. In my local news, there's been a lot of coverage recently on that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard trial. And, you don't have to be a celebrity to get local media coverage. You don't have to be celebrities like they are. And local media outreach really should be a key part of your strategy as you think about your goals as advocates. So let's do the next slide, Shannon. This is what we're going to do in our little packed hour here. I know many of you may know a lot of this material already, but if you do, it'll be a refresher of what are we talking about when we say local media? Why do we need to reach out to local media? How would you even do that? How do you share your story with them? And then what do you do once you get the coverage? So before we go to the next slide, I want to ask, unmute yourself and just shout out if you have ideas of what is local media. Do you have examples of any local media that you consume?
Local newspapers.
Local newspapers. And who is that just said that?
Mary Meekum.
Mary, do you know the name of your local newspaper? I'm just curious.
Katy Rancher.
The what rancher?
The Katy Rancher.
Katy, all right.
We also have Facebook posts for our community.
Absolutely, yep. Facebook channels for local media outlets.
Local radio.
Radio, an oft forgotten these days example of local media.
TV.
I see Matt Sharp said that one in the chat as well. And Sarah Tompkins said community magazines like Stroll Bridal Trails. Yes, if there's magazines as well, absolutely. Local news stations, Sarita, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that next slide, that's pretty much, we've hit the trifecta here with our print outlets and radio and TV. So we've established what is local media. And so let's talk about, next slide, please. Why should we be reaching out to local media? Another goofy cartoon that I enjoy. Why reach out to local media as opposed to, say, I see you laughing, Mary, as opposed to national media, right? There's local media that covers your state or community, and then there's national media that covers issues that cover the entire, that are relevant to the entire country. So here are some reasons. One is that there's a lot less competition, so it's a little easier for you to get on your local TV as opposed to any of the national channels. Or the same with, you know, getting in that Rampart paper versus the New York Times. It's easier. Second is that local media needs you as much as you need them. They're looking for content. Also, we trust our local media more than national media, says the polls. So that's very interesting. So it lends credibility to your cause. But most importantly, I believe, is that while not everyone consumes local media, I mean, Frank, really, the percentage of people who read your local newspaper, for example, is pretty small. But that small percentage of people, I guarantee you that all of your policymakers, all of your elected officials, your school officials, school board, your health officials, everybody, they read the local newspaper and they watch the news channel. I know, I mean, I had to do that in my jobs. I had to watch and look for trends and issues, or if people were saying something bad about us or whatever. So they're watching. So that's what to keep in mind if you're thinking, you know, what does it matter getting in my local newspaper? That's why. Also, it's free. Raise your hand or unmute and say hello if you have an advertising budget for a television, radio, or newspaper. I would love to know. Bravo to you if you do, but many of us do not. So reaching out and getting placements, free media, really is what we need as advocates, right? And in the process, we help save lives. So that's why this is so important. All right, so now I have your attention. Let's go to our next slide. And let's talk about how do we find this thing called local media? How do we reach out to them? Well, we've got to play detective. And it's, you know, many of you already know your local media, you watch the TV or what have you, but can you really name, like, who's that reporter that covers health issues or political issues, and maybe you know it on the local TV, but not on newspaper, you know, in the local newspaper. And, you know, just like the staffers in these offices, like we just talked about, they have high turnover. Well, reporters do too. You have to keep up with who's covering that beat, as they call it. So become a fan. You know, you binge watch Netflix or whatever, binge watch your local TV news, and binge read your local newspapers and find out who is covering the issues that are related to health and politics in particular. And if you don't know it, seriously, you put in your town plus the words local media in Google, and you start to get results and find out, oh, okay, that's my local TV station and that's my local newspaper. So, you know, and you poke around, you see who's covering what. And sometimes these days it can be a little tough to get an actual email address or contact information for an actual person. A lot of these companies are been bought up by bigger companies, and their websites are not as easy to navigate or don't provide that kind of information, which is quite annoying for people like me. But, you know, you can generally find at least an info address, email address, or a phone number of some sort. You can find them on Twitter, either the outlet in general or the reporter themselves. And Chandra, if you don't use Twitter, Twitter's really where the media, that's their main social media channel of choice. So that's why I mention Twitter. So when you're trying to reach you know, fellow advocates, you might use Facebook more, or if you're trying to reach, you know, maybe more of your pharmaceutical company contacts, maybe that's more on LinkedIn. Well, Twitter, that's where the media is. So it's another way to reach them, communicate to them. And I see, Kelly, about not getting a response. You reached out to some local media. So please, let's come back to that later in the presentation, Kelly. We'd love to talk through that issue with you. If you're, other resources to consider when you're trying to find out media contacts is using resources like if you're working with a lobbyist on on some bill in particular or whatnot, your lobbyist should give up any contacts that they have, names and email addresses for media. If you partner with pharmaceutical companies for any projects or whatever, ask to be connected to their comms team, and maybe their comms team could help locate local media contacts, because that's industry organizations can afford to pay for databases like they're called Cision as an example, and they can look up and find contacts without taking as much time if you're having difficulty finding it on Google. So just something to think about. Another way to find media is look around you at events. Now that we're starting to go back into the world now, and if you go to different hearings, for example, you may see media and you can introduce yourselves to them, and it's pretty easy to spot them because they're normally the ones who are sitting maybe up front or off to the side, and they've got a pad of paper that they're writing on, or they're the ones holding their phones like this because they're recording the hearing, or they're holding a video camera, so you could usually spot who looks like a media contact, and you can introduce yourself to them. And so I have an example of a media placement that occurred by introducing by an advocate who who got local media by introducing themselves to media at a hearing. So Shannon, if you'll let me drive for a sec, if you want to let me share my screen, I will try my best to
Hold on, let me make you, I think if I make you co-host.
Give me the keys. Squeaky wheel gets the what's it called? Squeaky wheel
Gets the grease.
Gets the grease, yes. I think, Sarah, that's what you're going towards there with Kelly's issue of going back to media. Okay, we'll come back to that, folks. All right, let's see. We're gonna do share, and we're gonna share my sound. Share screen. So Shannon, can you see this video paused?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, everybody, listen up. This is a couple minute example to show you.
A new kind of screening for newborns is up for discussion in the state.
KXAN's Stephanie Lee explains why parents of children with spinal muscular atrophy want the state to test for this debilitating disorder in all newborns.
At 6 years old, every day is a reminder.
Hunter's my hero.
Hunter is a fighter. Today, Crystal Davis is using her son's story to fight for other families.
They told us to expect 3 to 6 months as Hunter was so weak.
When he was just 8 weeks old, doctors told her Hunter had spinal muscular atrophy.
It's like ALS in babies. It robs the ability to move, to swallow, and ultimately breathe.
Luck connected their family with treatment options overseas.
A researcher actually provided us the chemistry for a compound. We found a company that manufactured the compound. We took that to Mexico, and 8 weeks after he was diagnosed, Hunter received his first life-saving treatment.
Their family went to Mexico every 6 weeks for treatment.
It was roughly $1 million.
Until the FDA approved Spinraza last year, the first treatment for this disorder in the U.S. With that step, the state is now exploring the option to add newborn screening for spinal muscular atrophy, but they're watching if it's recommended federally first. Crystal hopes it happens.
I don't want another parent to be told there's no hope for your child.
Steffi Lee, KXAN News.
Ooh. All right, sorry, let me stop that. All right, so who did we see there? Our friend Crystal in her local news station, and she did that by going up and giving a one-pager that had bullets about newborn screening. She was at a hearing on relating to newborn screening, and she introduced herself to the media and gotten the story that day. And so what I would like to point out here is that I think Crystal is not with us right now, but she told me about how much that placement helped advance her advocacy efforts. It really increased her credibility and her profile in the state among the policymakers who she was communicating with, and they saw her more as a credible go-to resource. So that's the gold standard. That is what you're trying to do. You're trying to do exactly what, trying to get that kind of a placement. And while I'm a big fan of local newspapers and radio, video really is something special when you can get a placement on TV. For one, I retain and have more of an emotional reaction and connection when I watch a video as opposed to reading an article, right? Yeah, I see you nodding, Dorothea. And video is also more appealing to young adults. So, you know, if that's a target audience of yours, it's easier to share on social media. You know, it ranks higher on the algorithm, so it'll be shown more to folks on social media than if you're sharing an article. And typically TV audiences are larger. So food for thought on that. So yay, Crystal. Shannon, would you like to share the next slide in the PowerPoint? This slide, how do I pitch my story? And I see, oh yeah, Lisa, video brought tears to your eyes, absolutely. Yeah, great. Okay, so how do I pitch my story? All right, here are some pointers. So for Kelly to keep in mind and all of us to keep in mind, this is, you know, whether it's in an email or in person, like you want to mention where you live, right? Like this is, I am a local resident, I'm in your viewing area. If you've done your homework and you find out that you have something in common with that reporter, like your kids go to the same school, or you know, you have some, you both like cats or something that you've learned about them online, you know, building that relationship, just like we talked about with the legislators, it's the same with the media, right? Like building those, like they're people, and it's not like, you know, they're there to like be at your beck and call. You want to really develop good solid relationships and get to know them and get to know what matters to them and what really, you know, interests them as reporters to cover. You want to include facts. They like facts. Give me the facts, ma'am. And not only facts in general, but facts that are localized to the community. For example, in newborn screening, if you're saying, you know, newborn screening impacts the 100,000 live births that happen in you know, the state of Virginia every year, you know, 400 of them are caught through newborn screening. That's specific to the state of Virginia, as opposed to saying like the whole country. You're saying like 30 million people in the United States, you know, have rare disease. Well, what does that mean for the state that you live in? That helps them more connect the dots and helps them do their jobs, because that's what it's about. You're there to help them do their jobs. Making it relevant for now. Why should they cover the story now? You know, is there some bill that's being introduced? Is there some event that you're holding? You know, is there an awareness month that's happening? Why should they care now? Help them so when they pitch it to their producer, they can say why now. Importantly, to make the ask, like literally say, you know, are you interested in covering the story and help shedding light? Keeping it brief, sharing photos or videos that you may have or links to them, right? Think about what you would want to receive. You know, right? You know, more than words. Like video is really impactful. Photos are impactful. Including your name and contact information. You know, I'd say obviously, but you know, you don't want to forget that. You know, different ways to contact you, to respond to you. And I would note if you are emailing a reporter, add them to your address book, because sometimes these things end up back in spam, and you don't know that you've actually gotten a response. It's crazy. Okay, next slide, please, Shannon. Not sure if you'll be able to see this too well, but this is an actual pitch that I sent that worked. I sent it to a local reporter of a local newspaper in Chanhassen, Minnesota. And I sent it to her because we had a new board member join the Every Life Foundation from that town. So I was sure, as you'll see in the subject line, I put the word Chanhassen rare disease patient, right? So they know right off, like this, I want to open this. And you'll see this is brief, right? This is not a novel, this is readable. I provide links to more information, right? So right off I say, we're a nonprofit and this woman from Chanhassen, Minnesota just joined our board. And then just a summary of how, you know, she's so well known and she's awesome. And even Senator Klobuchar has given her a shout out, you know, things to pique their interest and make it relevant. Because for this woman who's, you know, for me, who's reaching out from DC, why should she care what this DC person is saying to her? And, you know, and then I say what makes this board appointment especially timely is we just concluded Rare Disease Week on Capitol Hill, you know, where all these people came together. So it was a point in time that made it relevant. And then I said, please let me know if you would be interested in featuring this inspiring story. I'd be happy to provide photos and B-roll, that means video of Abby in action, or to set up an interview. So short and sweet, check some of the boxes that we talked about. And now let's go to the next slide, Shannon, to see what it resulted in. Front page story in the Chanhassen Villager. Abby is now a celebrity. So that's, I mean, this is nice, like big photo taking up the whole front page. That's what you're going for. That's what you're going for. Let's go to the next one. The next slide, Shannon. And again, this might be a little hard to read. This is decent. This is a sample, just to give you one more idea of what we're talking about with writing pitches. This is a sample pitch. This was not actually used, but a sample one that I wrote to help newborn screening advocates write a pitch, where it says, I'm a resident of such and such town, USA. And given that September is Newborn Screening Awareness Month, you know, I thought I'd reach out to you about a story. And then the next paragraph goes into some facts about, you know, what newborn screening is and the number of births it impacts in this state, and it summarizes how, you know, I'm a mother of someone who has been received treatment because of newborn screening, and other parents aren't as fortunate. So it's tugging at those heartstrings, and then then it goes on to touch on the legislation, the federal legislation that's expired, and it's a you know, critical issue. I've included a photo. I know you've covered health issues before, so let me know if you're interested in covering this. Here's my information. So I just want to give another example to get used to this idea of what we mean by a pitch. Okay, next slide, Shannon, please. Okay, so now let's talk. How about a volunteer? Let's try one or two. You know, let's help somebody who has a news item, some piece of news that you would love to be shared in your local media, and we'll just do a little brainstorm. Like just to think on in a second. Did somebody? Oh, Kelly, you got a raised hand. Kelly.
Yeah. Yes. So the reason I was reaching out to the different media outlets around me is because we're holding a CRPS awareness walk this Saturday, and I had reached out on social media. Like, one of the newscasters follows my service dog on Instagram and likes all his photos. So I tried sending him a DM. I tried emailing the news station, but I'm just not getting any feedback. Only one newspaper has responded to me, and they did do a story on it. They've done a couple stories for me, actually, but besides that, I haven't been able to get any news outlets or other papers to see the value in, you know, raising awareness about this condition.
Kelly, let me ask you a question. Did you just say that someone covered it?
Newspaper just did it this past weekend.
What, your local newspaper?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So one thing for you guys to know is that television and radio often follow print, as they call it. So have you shared this news article with
No, I have
television
not
station? Okay.
actually.
This is a great opportunity. And by the way, I'd be happy, Kelly, to work with you, take a look at what, like the email that you want to send to them or whatever. And goes the same for everybody here on the call, because I know we have limited time today. And so I'm happy to be a resource for you. But sending, when you've already achieved an article in the newspaper, Kelly, that's your credibility. That's like your way in, your foot in the door. You can now reach out to the TV station and radio, or radio, and say, "Nya, nya." No, I'm just kidding. You say
That's perfect though. I never thought of that.
You don't want to say "nya, nya." You want to say, I thought I'd share with you this great piece that we were so happy to have placed in the such and such newspaper. And I love you to consider covering it, with your news station. So it gives them something to look at and see how was it, what was the angle that the newspaper used. And to give you an example of what I'm talking about, if you turn on the morning news, no matter what it is, whether you watch CNN, Fox, anything, every story that they talk about, they got from the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or the Washington Post. You look at the headlines and you're like, yep. There's hardly anything new. They get it. They open up the papers in the morning and they produce those stories. So this is a great leverage point for you, Kelly.
That's great. Thank you. I never thought about it that way, but
yeah,
that's perfect.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Are there thank you for sharing with us. Is there anyone else who'd like to talk through an idea that they have of a piece of news that they would like to get?
Chandra's hand up.
They did? Okay, great. Thank you, because I can't really see everybody. Chandra, tell us what news you would like to get covered. Hi, Chandra. Would you like to share with us, Chandra, what news you would like to get covered in the local media? Chandra might be having trouble with audio. We can come back to you, Chandra.
Yeah, her mute is off, but we can't hear you, Chandra.
Okay, and Chandra, we can connect one-on-one. We've talked before. So anyone else who has a raised hand? I don't know. Dorothea, I see your hand.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one I see.
So if this pertains to local media, but I think it also pertains to maybe national media too. I'm not exactly sure. We've been trying to get some coverage on Prader-Willi syndrome for a little bit, and we have a volunteer who works with a really big company that I probably shouldn't say, but she's been compiling. She's been taking videos and photos that we have and creating like a short 3-minute heart-tugging kind of montage for us to send out. And it's not quite done, but it should be done by the beginning of next week. And we have voiceover, and it talks about statistics relating to Prader-Willi syndrome, and it ties them back into the rare disease community so that it makes a small portion of the rare disease community seem, larger, because when you look at us in the aggregate, we actually are large. If 30 million Americans have a rare disease, that's significant. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to send it out to local media outlets in addition to national, or if there's an outlet we should focus on in particular. I'm just not sure how to start.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So I would encourage you to look at the video that you're talking about as a tool to to help get news covered. Because launching or creating a video in and of itself, is that news, right? Like, you have to think about what's newsworthy, but if you're going to be, let's say, I'll throw out an example and then maybe others could chime in. If you are gathering a group to all participate in Rare Across America, Dorothea, and It's like you can reach out to media and say, you know, we have 12 out, or yeah, I don't know, maybe that, you know, we have a half a dozen advocates, you know, in the local area who are participating in this, you know, during August recess when our elected officials are home, we are coming to talk to our elected officials, and this is a video that we're going to share with them. And, you know, this is what we're going to be asking for. And we, you know, would like to know if you'd be interested in covering this story, because just because Congress is in recess, they're still working during August. Like, so then maybe that's an example of like,
Okay.
you know, a relevant timing, something that you're doing, something that might be considered newsworthy.
That's perfect. We're doing a fly-in in September, and it never occurred to me to use this as, yes, no, that's perfect. Thank you.
Perfect. Right. Anyone else have any ideas or suggestions for Dorothea on that? Great, either way. I know we have a lot of amazing minds on this call, so I encourage you guys to stay in touch and brainstorm on these kinds of things. All right, any one more we want to take? Anybody has a news item they would be interested in getting coverage on?
I thought I saw Sarah's hand up for a little while. I don't know if she changed her mind.
Is my microphone working now?
Oh, it is Chandra.
Chandra
Okay.
from the lovely state of Georgia.
Okay, speaking of Georgia, we're trying to get this rare disease group together because Georgia doesn't have a rare disease. So we're trying to get one together, and we would like to get coverage on that.
Tell me what you mean by rare disease group.
Anyone who has a rare disease, like I have one, and like people with different rare diseases.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to get, well, we're actually on Facebook, when we just got a group together based on our communication, like getting together with state advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them to let's get us a state advocacy together, a group together.
Great. I mean, forming these state groups of whatever kind it may be, you know, a caucus, an advisory group, or an informal group, if that's what you're talking about, Chandra, you need attention in order to attract members. Is that your goal? You want to attract people to join your group?
Yes, so I have a picnic coming up on the 18th, and one of the ladies in the group, she's going to make some cards, and I'm going to pass them out to people that have a rare disease like me, that's affected with the same thing as I do. So that's one way we want to get some members.
Chandra, you're way ahead of me, because I was going to say, why don't you have some event that you could invite the media to, because that would be a thing. That would be something that's happening. And you're way ahead of me. You have an event. So that's what you want to tell the media, that you're having this event. And one thing maybe to keep in mind, Chandra, is if there's any notable speakers, any well-known people in the community that you could invite to come to this event, because that might attract media if they know that such and such legislator or well-known person is coming.
Well, my neurologist, the doctor, he's well-known, the doctor at Emory, my neurologist. And he's the only one that I can think of.
Well, that's good to have an expert like that to offer to the media for interviews. So that's good. But I think, you know, this may require a little bit more brainstorming of how you could make it a little bit more enticing. Does the group have any ideas or an example of when you've hosted an event that's, you know, you've been able to get some attention on in the media? Well, that's all right. We you know what, Chandra, we can follow up and keep brainstorming on this one.
I'm gonna just pop in a little bit because I
Yeah.
just peeked, and it looks like Georgia just got an RDAC. So connecting with them might be a good way for you to, you know, promote that, connect with other people who are on their rare disease advocacy.
Georgia's just got a what?
And what is an RDAC, Mary?
Oh, sorry. An RDAC is a rare disease advisory council. So it brings together a variety of different stakeholders together. So it'll be patients and patient organizations and medical people all together. So it's already, if you're looking to create this organization, there is another organization that, and I can put in the link to it. You could join with them, but you can also start your own, you know, another, whatever organization you are working on, because sometimes you need the combination, and Shannon will, you know, you can look on the website that having an RDAC and also a patient organization and also either a caucus, a rare disease caucus or working group, depending on what Georgia has. Because like in Maryland, they have working groups, they don't necessarily have caucuses. So all three of these organizations all help the rare disease community. So yeah, I'll look it up, and I was trying to get onto the website to share it with you, but I'll find it and send it.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I see another suggestion from Betty Marie about inviting local politicians. That's a great example of someone who, if you have any politicians who've been supportive of rare disease issues in the past. And the trick, Chandra, is that with these events is that you're trying to get coverage so that you can get people to come to the event, which is tough to get that coverage beforehand because, you know, you're trying to get people to come to the event because a lot of times media just wants to come to the event itself and, you know, see the things in action and see the people there. So it's tricky, and it does take some advanced planning. So if this is June 18th that you're talking about, you've got a tight time frame.
I know.
Yeah, but thank you, Mary and Betty Marie and.
But I do have
Rich.
a relationship with the media.
You do have that relationship that you've got in your back pocket, Chandra.
Yeah.
She knows somebody at her local TV station, and I would definitely, you know, Chandra, what you can do when you have contacts like this, if you've made contact with media, you could ask them, say, look, this is something I have planned that I'd love to get coverage on. Is this something that you'd be interested in, or is there anything that I could do to make this more enticing for you to cover? Like what is it? You know, ask for their help. And, you know, is this kind of story, or what do you need? You need my local elected official? What's gonna make your boss allow you to come and cover it? You know, that's what you're trying to get at.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
I can't wait to hear what happens, Chandra. And Rich, I believe, is providing or offering his assistance as well. So thank you, Rich, for following up with Chandra. Okay, are there any other hands raised on this issue? Anyone else who wanted help from the group, or we can move forward?
An interesting question from Nisha on there, Britta, if you wanted to answer that question.
How many news stories there are daily and how brief attention spans are on? How can we make sure that the call to action is clear for the reader? You know, how can you make Nisha is what you're asking, like, how can you really make sure that the news placement that hits on what you want it to hit?
Yes, exactly. And raising awareness, I think, is can be very powerful. But then, the next day there's going to be coverage about something else, and so I just wonder, basically, how do we maximize our opportunities to be in the media?
Yes. Making it clear to the reporter what it is that you're trying to achieve, what you're trying to get people to do. Like, this is what's happening, and we're trying to get, people to, go to this website and sign up for our newsletter to learn more, so please share this URL in your coverage. you can just simply make it as clear as you can to the reporter. However, there's no guarantees as to how something will be covered in the media, right? You can't demand, you can't, you don't want to ruin relationships that you have with the media. You just want to offer, offer your information and be a resource and hope for the best coverage. And if something is covered incorrectly, meaning if something's factually incorrect, you're welcome to follow up with them and ask for a correction. But let's go to the next slide, Shannon, and talk about what do you do once you get coverage? To your point, Nisha, how do you really maximize coverage? So absolutely thank the reporter. And by that, I mean saying something to them specific that you liked about the coverage or appreciate, or how much they will impact the community. Because just be sensitive about the fact that reporters don't want to feel like they're being used. I mean, like, or that they're doing the bidding of any one cause in particular. They're independent and they're journalists, and they, are putting forth their stories. So it's like they're not doing you a favor. You know what I mean? Like, they don't want to be seen as like they're doing you a favor. So just, I just want to throw that nuance out there for when you follow up and thank your reporter. Absolutely share on your social media channels. If it is something that is, not rare disease, any specific rare disease, but community-wide, we'd be happy to share on the Every Life channels, ask other people to share, post on your website, include in your newsletter, put it in your email signature line, add the link for people to see it there in the future. If you do an annual report, put it there. It lends to your credibility. And follow up and stay connected with the reporter. Put a reminder on your calendar for a month later to maybe find some excuse to reach out to them. And think of it as developing a relationship with the reporter means not always asking, but giving. Like, keep in mind, if you see something that you think that would be helpful to this reporter, oh, I just, met so-and-so who might be good for a story if you're doing it about such and such, because I know you like covering such and such. It doesn't have to, it doesn't have to benefit you all the time directly. You see what I'm saying? Like, that really builds the relationship. So it's not you're going like hat in hand every time you talk to the reporter, but think of it as you're building this relationship. You want to be seen as a resource. So then the next time when you have something that you really want them to cover, they'll be more amenable to it, because it's like, oh, that's the person who gave me this wonderful tip on this other story. And keep in mind that reporters often like to do follow-up stories on a story. So mark your calendar for 6 months or a year after you get the coverage to tell them what's new. We had this happen with the STAT Act. When the STAT Act first came out, we had coverage from Representative Bilirakis's local TV station in Florida. And a year later, they reached out to us saying, hey, it's been a year since we did this story. What's new? And they did another placement. You don't have to wait. You can be proactive. And when you're coming up on that 6 months or a year, reach out and tell them what's new. Where are you? What progress have you made? So that they could update viewers or readers. Let's go to the next slide, Shannon. So, if you didn't get covered, you can't, get a home run every time you step up to the plate. I'm really bad with sports analogies, but you know what I'm saying. So don't be nervous about, following up. If you sent one email or tried one, maybe you try to reach them by phone if you have a phone, if you have a phone number, or send a second email and say, hey, just thought I'd check in one more time and see if you were interested in the story. I've attached, a couple more photos that I thought that might help illustrate. Stay in touch, keep following them on social media. Try another reporter, or try submitting a letter to the editor or a commentary piece. Let's go to the next slide. This is also local media. In your local newspaper, they still have letters to the editor section and opinion piece sections where they need content. They're looking for good, well-written, brief content. So if you can make something be dramatic and relevant, meaningful, I'm telling you, like 9 times out of 10, you're gonna get in to the newspaper. So that's a great way to get your foot in the door for local media. The difference between letter to the editor and op-eds, letter to the editor is usually a super brief, like 150 words to 300 words, hence my Jefferson quote here. Like they're looking for short, pithy pieces. So be mindful, check for their word limits on their website, do the research to find their word limits. Op-ed, and then that's usually in response to something that's been written in the newspaper. So look for opportunities when you read your local newspaper, if something's being covered that can somehow be connected, like if they do an article that has to do with, I don't know, maybe somebody can think of it, help me with an example. If they're covering something about, Affordable Health Care Act, like, maybe you want to say, I saw this article on such and such. I just want to point out, you submit this letter to the editor that has to do with this access issue having to do with rare disease, or connect the dots on how that bill affects your rare disease community and what, and what you would encourage readers to do. So once you start reading a newspaper through that lens, you'll start getting ideas. And an op-ed is usually longer, like it could be several hundred words. But in any case, being brief, authentic, and relevant is key. And the next slide, Shannon, is I have an example of an opinion piece that I pulled, because I don't know if he's still on. Carl Barnes is with affiliated with sudden arrhythmia death syndrome. He was on this group earlier today, and this just happens to be an opinion piece related to that topic in a Maryland local newspaper. And so it's an example of someone who submitted an opinion piece. They noted themselves as being a longtime resident of that area that the newspaper covers, and they told their personal story, and they related the issue of sudden arrhythmia death syndrome to the reports in the paper and in the news media at that time about sudden death by young athletes. Doesn't that ring a bell? There was athletes who were, young people who were dropping dead, and they realized that they had these heart issues, and that was the way to diagnosis. And that they plugged into that issue and got this wonderful placement in the Howard County Times. And so now, Shannon, if you want to let me drive, I have just a few more resources that I'd like to make you aware of. Okay. Share my screen. Okay, so I want to come back to the idea of press release. Can you all see it says Relay Foundation continues to diversify board with young adult Abby Hauser? Yes. Okay. So this is an example of a press release, and this is what I wrote that helps supplement that pitch that I submitted. And there's a link in the presentation if Shannon shares this with you. This is on our website. And this follows the basic flow of what a press release is. You can write press releases. Anyone can write a press release. And it does help in your pitches to the media. And the press release like this one, it starts with a short lead, a short first paragraph that says what the news is. Oftentimes a press release, the flow is that the second paragraph is a quote, maybe quoting you or someone else. It includes a photo. Then it'll go on to give a paragraph that gives more details about the news, and then maybe quoting someone else. This is just an example of a press release and what a resource that I have for you to play with, if you'd like to, is this form. Can you see this PDF up online? Yeah. This is where I've broken down, like, if this is, you could print this out and like write your first press release, like, you know, put your name here. This first box here is for a headline. Sometimes I write the headline first, sometimes I write it last. You know, in this next box is for your lead, the 1 to 2 sentences that summarize your news, the what, the who, the when, the where. The next box is for, you know, write a quote someone saying something that supports the news that you're putting forth. Then in the next box, you know, write a couple sentences about the facts, you know, behind the story. And then the next little box, you plug in any background information like about your organization. So it's a form to help guide you through how to write your own press release. And let me see. Oh yes, I remember. I was going to tell you about one more resource to leave you with. There's a page on the Every Life website that contains much of the information that we went through today. If you go to our website under resources, local media toolkit, and you'll see some examples of local media, and then this will look familiar to you about what is local media, how do I find my reporter, what do I include in a pitch, what do I do next? So that's like an easy thing for you to find, right? Because sometimes that can be more fun than going to a PowerPoint presentation. So that is basic. That's it, folks. That's what I got.